What happened to the flag?
Yeah,
It was always there. Right?
we're missing a flag.
Guess you don't do the flag.
I heard you.
Can you do a pledge without a flag? I don't think you're supposed to, but.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna skip the pledge, and next time we'll have to make sure we got a flag in here.
Well, this is like flag game.
Okay, do we have public comment? This is an opportunity for anyone to address the public safety on any issue. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. While the Public Safety Committee encourages input from residents, it may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noticed on the agenda. Those wishing to speak during the virtual meeting must register prior to the start time of the current meeting. You are encouraged to register your comment by sending an email to Tony at Cross Plains, which is also on our webpage ahead of the meeting, which will be read at the meeting. You may also call the police department during regular business hours. The meeting room will be opened 30 minutes before the meeting to collect registrations. To register a public comment, at this time you will need to raise your hand virtually to be unmuted. Telephone participants will also be unmuted one at a time during this period to ensure that no one is missed.
Okay, we have 2 people. Jay?
You want to do the virtual one first?
Yeah, we can do the virtual one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lori, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Lori. So this is Lori Luffenberg that would like to address the board or the committee. Go ahead, Lori.
This is actually Bruce and Lori Laufenberg. We live at 2952 Finnis Street, and I am just addressing you tonight regarding the parking on Finnis, as I know that has become a potential issue, I guess. I just want to stress that I am hoping that this does not become a no parking area. We have moved the trailer that was being complained about. We actually had expressed concern about parking back when they were redoing this road and putting in a sidewalk. And at that time, we were told that they were going to look at making the north side of this road no parking and having the center line offset more towards the north, and then leaving parking available on the south side of Finnis. So if you are looking to do something, I would like to push for you to do something more on that avenue than making the whole street no parking. I know it's not so critical right now with COVID and all, but when things get better, if we were to have a party or family over, we would have no place for them to park if the street is made no parking. So I think that's it, unless my husband has anything else, and he says no. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Jay Langfeld.
Yeah, I'm Jay Langfeld, live at 3092 Creekside Way, village president. The reason I'm here is because of that role. I know at your last meeting you passed the purchase of tasers and less than lethal and body cams. I am referring it back because I think there needs to be more information. And what I'm really looking for is, because we believe in community policing, it's just not the necessary the purchase of these items, but it's also how they're going to be used. So part of what I'd like this committee to do is look at what the policy would be, for example, for tasers. While the law may justify certain things, would we be comfortable with using a taser against a 12-year-old or an 85-year-old or someone riding a bicycle, or someone running away. You know, the tasers also can take the cartridge out and be used as a stun gun. So is it appropriate, for example, one might be appropriate is if we're trying to arrest somebody and they've lain down on the ground and they got their hands hidden under their body to tase them to get it out. But would we do the same thing if we had protesters sitting in Village Hall here and we're asking them to move and they don't? Would we use a taser on them? Do we think it's appropriate to use a taser at, let's say, the schools at Glacier Creek or St. Francis or Park? So I think that's just on the taser. So what I'd like the committee to do is really look and review the recommendations from the police on the uses and limitations of that equipment, because I think that's the key. I think having officers have tasers or less than lethal, you know, that can be discussed, the pros and cons, and I'm guessing you spent the time on that, and you felt it was worthy to do that. But now the important part is, what are the standards and the norms that the citizens are comfortable with in the usage of that equipment? So there's a lot of policies out there. I can tell you, the Madison Police Department, we learned the hard way on especially tasers. There were a number of major events that pretty much helped guide us in the policy there. I don't know how many people remember, but we didn't have tasers for more than a couple months when we actually deployed one at Memorial at one of their students. And the backlash from the community, the schools, and even the policymakers were incredible. So, and I can tell you on the fleeing suspect, we used to be able to tase those, but it turned out that people were getting injured pretty bad when they were running and were being tased, because obviously you can't catch yourself, so you do face dives into concrete and down walls and stuff like that. So I think it's important for the group to look at that and all those groups. And the other thing that when we look at is not only the initial cost of these projects, but also ongoing. And that would also include the training part of these, because we got to look at, and I'll just keep on tasers since that's on the agenda. Are we going to bring someone in to train, and how many times do they have to be updated this training, or are we going to send somebody to train the trainer? And if that's the case, how long does that certification go? How long, how many days? So we have to look at the whole picture of what the total cost of these projects are going to be. And then the last part that I'd like to know from your group is the level of priority. So we have instituted a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is a high priority, a mandatory, must do. We're willing to tax the taxpayers immediately to get funds to do it. A 5 would be, it'd be really nice to have, but we'll wait until there's money available for it, and then there's that scale in between. So it's important for me, and I think for the board, so when you say we want tasers, well, is it a 1 or is it a 5? Just so we have some idea, because obviously the village can't purchase everything and do everything. We have to plan it out and budget for it. So that's a critical part. So just to wrap this up, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, the other thing that would be very helpful, and this will fall more on the chief, but I want to make sure you guys approve it, is we need to have these things written down. So what we should have is a proposal, let's say taser proposal. There should be, the first part of it is the reasons why, or the purpose of the tasers, and then the next one would be the usage of it or non-usage of it. The next would be the total cost, and then the last would be the priority level that you have. So that way, when it gets to the board and we vote on it, we're all voting on the same thing, instead of, okay, when you say you want tasers, I'm interpreting that since I work for the Madison Police Department, you're thinking of the policies and how it gets used for the Madison Police Department, but it may be what's gonna happen. So then something bad happens and we kind of go, well, we didn't really pass it for that, and you know what I mean? So if we have it written, everybody knows what they're voting for, plus there's a record of it then. So in 10 years, when someone wonders, okay, why, and it's time to replace tasers, because they're not gonna last forever, someone can go back and say, these are the reasons, and are they still applicable, or is there new technology out there? So that's what I just wanted to let you know is why I've asked for these things to be rediscussed by your committee. So I know it's more work and everything, but I think it's really critical if we really believe in community policing that the community has some say in how we police.
Jay, are you looking for this committee to present the board with a policy? Is that what you're looking for?
This is how I would do it. I would expect the chief to draft a policy. I would expect you guys to review it.
And then,
And if you agree with all of it, that's fine. If you disagree, then we can do it two ways. You know, you can say, no, I'd rather see it this way. I mean, there are, as you know, in policing, there's what Department of Justice, Law Enforcement Training Bureau says, and then there's the things, well, okay, we can do it, but is it the right thing to do? And that's why I think maybe a starting point would really be good for everybody to know where tasers and less lethal fall on the level of use of force, because that's what it is. And if you knew what was underneath taser and what was above taser, you kind of see where it is. And you're gonna see, well, tasers are pretty low level use of force. It's really pretty low. So now you gotta think of, okay, this is, but are there circumstances, even though an officer could, do we still want them to do it? And like I say, if you go to a lot of police departments, I think there's very few that have no restrictions on the use of tasers. I think all of them have some type of restrictions. And like I say, we learned the hard way, and I'd rather not learn it that way here in Cross Plains.
do you have a time frame in this, Jay?
No, that's more up to the chief to work on. I want you feeling comfortable, because I think these are, use of force right now are big items.
That was part of our big conversation at the last meeting.
Absolutely, absolutely, it's something to consider. And I'm gonna not talk about it, but I'll be back when you have body cams on there, because that's another huge issue. But it's much different than what you're working with today. I think the less than lethal is probably one of the easier ones, but even there's restrictions. You just don't shoot somebody with those beanbags. You don't aim for the head, at least our policy, you couldn't aim for the head, and you couldn't aim for the groin area. And there's, reasons for that, So, those are the things, it's not just, hey, let's go get them, let's talk about it and talk about, as you guys are taxpayers, where's the level of where you want the money spent? Does that answer your question? I don't have a deadline. I think the
Yeah, I
chief.
just wanted to get a sense of if you're looking for us as a committee to then approve a policy that then is reviewed.
Well,
by the board moving forward.
I would ask that you support or recommend a policy.
Gotcha.
Good?
That's good.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You guys have a
Thank
nice
you.
meeting, and thank you for doing this. I know it's a lot of work.
Tony, this is Kevin. Jay, if you're still there.
Yes.
Just on a timing of that, are there critical dates though from a budget standpoint that we need to consider this is one. And then my second question is minus a drafted and approved policy and procedure on the use of tasers. Can we still move this forward from a budget standpoint, or are all those required to even get it approved?
Well, here's the thing. I don't want you tied down to a budget. If it comes to the point where this is a high priority and we think we need to do it, we'll come up with the money.
Okay.
Good to know.
Yeah, so I don't want it, the budget, like I say, on the 23rd, we're gonna pass a budget, but obviously we have reserves And we are hoping to get some reimbursement from the federal government, the CARES program. They've opened it up a little bit more, so hopefully we'll be getting a little bit more than just our costs of extra that weren't budgeted. So I think there will be. We've shifted some of the fund balances of other accounts into the general fund balance. So I think we'll be able to do it. That should not be a worry of the group. You come in with a solid proposal and the board agrees with it, it's not gonna be knocked down because it's not in the budget.
Okay, makes sense.
Good to know.
All right?
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, you have a good one now.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay.
Was that it?
Yep, we don't have anybody else.
Okay. So approval of minutes from the October 6th.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
And then we'll,
All in favor?
oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I not the same?
Okay.
Yes. Report of our officers. So I have, I mean, obviously working on the tasers and less lethal is, I feel like a higher priority.
That's a priority in my life.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if we can, I don't, you know, we can do the things that come up, but I think, Tony, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys have probably seen, and we'll probably discuss it more down the line, but all the issues have already been addressed. If you see your packet, so reasons why we've already discussed, we have plenty of reasons why. The usage of it is covered in policy. Now that policy is best practice. Now we could adjust it, and Jay's talking about individual ways of adjusting it. You have to rely on your officers that they will apply it with the use of common sense. I mean, if you actually limit the officer to say, okay, in the school you can't, and then there's a school shooting and he could have used you can't limit people to a degree where it's like yay or nay. Policies are guidelines.
It's a
You can't,
framework for the officer.
you cannot make policies so restrictive that they handcuff the officer instead of helping the officer. So the policy's already been written. Now we can adjust it. I wrote it and provided it for you guys. And then total cost is
Did you
in.
know that policy
I-
was in here?
I don't think so, because he didn't get the copy of the packet, nor did he ask. So I don't know that way. And then level 1 to 5, I mean, it's already been hit here. It's a 1 priority. I mean, it should have been a 1 priority for many years ago. I mean, we should have access to everything that is not lethal if we can afford it. And so I don't think that you'll see the total cost in there. It's not that big of a cost. And so I agree with him. We need to be meticulous as far as the policy goes and whatnot, but I don't think we need to stall it for a budget item. My plan originally was to have this on in the process in 2021, just so we could work through it and whatnot, but I've been asked by board members to make this a priority because it's a hot topic. So we can discuss it more as we move on, but I agree with Lori. I think all these 4 things that he's talking about have already been outlined. And so I think I could easily put together a proposal, and, you know, I believe that there'll be 101 questions, but we'll just answer them as they
I
come.
have a training question too. With regard to the training, is it something, and I don't want to sound ignorant because it's not with your in-service training, is this something that's incorporated into the in-service training that you do with the use of the taser?
So it would be, yeah, right now we don't have it, but my goal would be that we have a firearms trainer that we would, and I've already spoken to him, that he would become the trainer of that as well. we would train with it at minimum once a year. Same thing with less than lethal. Firearms, you're required to qualify once a year. So I think tasers and less than lethal, we should require to qualify at least once a year. If state mandates firearms to be once a year, then we should at least do that once a year. There's other requirements like operation of a motor vehicle, emergency motor vehicles every other year. So there's some other standards, but I think when you're talking about use of force, we need to be familiar with it. I've already, even though we have policies that dictate firearms and those kind of things, I'm actually going to be having the officers have firearms 4 times a year, so we can be much more qualified with firearms and different techniques. So we actually have a training scheduled here on Thursday. So, but we can discuss that more as we get through it.
I thought I saw there was something in here where the training was identified. Can't find it.
The fiscal impact, it just has parentheses around training equipment.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're referring to. And Chief Tony's summary.
So the training is, it wasn't part of the purchase, right? Of the equipment?
No, I separated it out. So one part is the purchase and the other part's
Oh, yeah,
training.
here it was, that's under fiscal impact.
And we can get to that. I think it's line item 5. So we'll be discussing that further at that point.
Any other questions on that right now? I mean, that's just, I think, what our big item is going to be for the next few months, for sure. To be able to, you'll work on probably getting the whole policy organized and what we need. That's all I have. Anyone have anything else?
Okay.
Report of first responders. Do we have EMS chief out there?
EMS chief is not here.
Fire chief?
Not on either.
Police chief?
Okay. The only
Very
thing,
busy.
we've been extremely busy, but
Yeah.
the only thing I have to report is that we did have an officer test positive for COVID, so it did affect our scheduling. So scheduling has been a little tight due to that, but we've managed, and I think we're about out of it. The officer should be returning back to duty either tomorrow or the next day. So
Nice.
other than that,
Any idea how we contacted it? On the job or?
yeah, it could have been. I mean, we have contacts with so many
Yeah.
people that it could be on or off duty. We would, if an officer or a first responder were to get sick, you almost have to assume he's getting it at work because we're in contact with so many people all day long. So we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves. And after that exposure, we had the whole place decontaminized, and including up here downstairs. So we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves.
Good.
That's where the flags.
Unrelated to
That's where the flag is.
Was there anything from Halloween, any incidents or concerns or complaints related to how folks conducted trick-or-treating or anything else related to Halloween this year?
I have not received any complaints.
Okay.
Okay, our committee discussions. So, number 1 on here is the discussion and possible action regarding traffic issues on the 2900 block of Finnis Street. I think Tony can enlighten us a little bit more on what that's about.
Yep, so I've invited, I see Jerry's on here as well, so I'll have him speak on this, but from a complaint standpoint, we had about 5 complaints of a trailer basically impeding traffic. I did send you guys some emails that I received, reference complaints, also some photographs that I took, you know, when monitoring the area, and obviously, as you can see in one of the photos, someone is clearly over the double yellow, and so especially during the morning hours, it's a lot of traffic going out that way. Lori and Bruce were very kind to move their trailer, even though they were not in violation of any law. I spoke to them and informed them about, well, specifically Lori, I spoke to her and informed her that this was going to be on the agenda, and if she felt strongly about the no parking, that she should attend, and I'm glad she did. I honestly think that the trailer being moved is good enough. I don't see the need to put that as a no parking. It's a lot of traffic. There's people that live there. If anything to be considered would be to move the center line over so you provide more room on that side of the street. There's already no parking on the opposite side. But I've invited Jerry, and he's going to talk about several things on our agenda. But I think I'm going to unmute him and see if he has anything to add before you guys discuss it.
Do they intend to keep parking the trailer in their driveway as opposed to on the street, or is that gonna be a?
At this point, it's off the street now. I don't know if it's good practice for us to enact ordinances because of one person not following something that in essence they're not violating a law. So you'd have to change it for one person affecting a whole block. So I'm going to ask Jerry to unmute. Hi, Jerry.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but we just want a little bit of history with regard to the traffic issues on Thinness on the 2900 block.
Wasn't aware of any before I got on this meeting tonight.
Okay.
So we're talking about, do you know the area we're talking?
Yep, I'm familiar with it.
Okay. And when we listen to the homeowners speaking, I guess, you know, I don't know if something was overlooked when they did the center line or when they did that road. I guess, are you aware of anything about that?
The location of the center line was debated at length by the village board in numerous areas on Highway P or Church Street or Thinness Street or Springfield Road, whichever one you want to call it. And the final location of the center line was voted on, and it varies throughout the length of Highway P. All the different variations were voted on by the village board, so that's where they were put.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking for, is just some historical data as to how those decisions were made.
Yeah, it was all action by the village board when they approved the final plans.
Okay.
I'll just make a quick historical comment too. I grew up on the corner of Church and Thinness on the 2929 Church Street. Church picnic, baseball games, I mean, there used to be cars parked up and down both sides of the street. I'm not saying it was safe or anything like that. I certainly feel that the work done both with the turn lane coming off of P onto Thinness, right by the dentist office, I think it's been made much, much safer. Mm-hmm. I'm appreciative of Bruce and Lori being good neighbors. I think they'll continue probably to park that trailer there on the driveway without a big deal, and I do think there should be some flexibility that's changed, you know, their way of life for a lot of those neighbors. I do think it's a good thing to have that safer sidewalk. So I think overall the project was good, and that we should probably as a safety committee continue to monitor. Mm-hmm. And I think it's good not to have parking on the other side of the street, so.
So is this being generated by this trailer? Is this? the
That's it. That, we have not received any other complaints.
Looked like it was based on that.
So we're not necessarily dealing with a parking problem, we're
No.
dealing with this trailer having been parked there a lot and causing this problem.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think just, obviously we have a whole town question of places to park. So I don't think doing no parking would be it's just not gonna help at all. And, if he has to park the trailer on the road, if he would just do it for a short period of time and keep in mind the traffic morning and evening, if he can have that trailer moved, is that,
I think, with regards to the ordinance, there's nothing like that provides any kind of hours or anything like that. So I don't think we can direct them unless you were to change the ordinance or recommend that we change the ordinance to a certain hour. I think Lori and Bruce were like, Doug just said, they were neighborly, they moved the trailer. We haven't received any other complaints on that street with regards to any traffic. And I've seen 2 semis meet at that location and were able to go around. I think this specifically dealt with the trailer. And so I think by all intents and purposes, I think that matter's been resolved. Now we can ask Lori and Bruce if their intention is to sometimes park it there, if you want to get some information from them, or does it matter?
I think it'd be a good idea to
Okay.
ask them.
I'm going to ask that Lori unmute and answer that question if she would.
Yes, thank you. For the most part, we won't be parking on the road. There may be short occasions, when we're, moving things around or, doing things that we may have to have it on the road for a short period of time. But we will definitely, work to be more conscious on keeping it off the road whenever possible.
Okay,
Thank you, Lori.
yeah,
Thank you, Lori.
And I think that's appreciated.
Thank you.
yeah, definitely,
Because we know how.
We appreciate you guys working with us.
yeah.
FedEx and Amazon and UPS, they're all,
Yeah,
I just think you have people that want to work with us, it's not a problem. You can't write ordinances based on a trailer sometimes being there and not being there and change the whole crux of the traffic flow and the parking and everything.
right, and change their life over a trailer,
I think we just,
Yeah.
like you said, monitor the situation. If it becomes a problem again, we'll deal with it, but for now, I don't think we need to take any more action on this.
Yeah, this is Kevin. I agree. I struggle a little bit on this because, kind of like Jerry said, you can go, from Quick Trip or from Culver's all the way down Church or P to Thinness, and it could be highly debated if there should be no parking on the right-hand side, which anyone that parks in front of Bear Park where it's not yellow, you're gonna have, even the smallest of cars, that's parked in the smallest of cars that it needs to go around, they're gonna have to cross that center line. So that's Church Street. Then you get to Thinness, and in my opinion, that trailer's not any wider than the SUV.
Well,
It looks more overbearing just because of the shape and size, the height of it.
yeah.
But it's not like it's twice the width of a vehicle. So I think we have bigger issues with our roads than a particular trailer. And if we can have some neighborly consciousness of maybe what it might pose in terms of traffic, that's one thing. But to create a policy, I don't know where you would stop.
Yeah.
yeah.
At this point.
I would agree, Kevin, and the only thing I would add is that going over the double yellow line is to pass parked vehicles or that are legally parked and or slow moving vehicles is allowed by state law. So I don't think there's any violation of law there, even if people pass. The key to the law is that they pass with due regard. So if there's a crash, the question's going to be, did you pass with due regard? Which, it's pretty obvious to answer that question that they didn't if there was an accident. So I think the decision to have no action is the correct one, in my opinion.
Just to follow up on that, because I know, because of that, some homeowners along there have been conscious of this, and they've, parked up onto the curb. And it doesn't seem like that's happening as much anymore. I just wanted to ask if that was spoken to.
Yeah, that was addressed, so that is against.
It was, okay.
Yeah, so that is against ordinance and state law. You can't park on sidewalks. And so, that was addressed, and that was immediately taken care of by who was doing that. So, and again, in the defense of the person that was parking in that manner, they were trying to just not create a traffic hazard, so they did that, thinking they could get off the road a little further, and then our department spoke to them and said you can't really do that, and now we have this type of complaint. So
exactly,
can't please everybody.
Really?
True story.
Okay, so,
Can we make a motion on this then?
yep,
Sure.
I'll make a motion that we take no further action regarding this and that we monitor the situation if it becomes a greater problem in the future.
I'd second that.
okay. Number 2, discussion and possible action regarding additional locations for pedestrian crossing, rapid response, flashing beacons.
So this was asked of me to invite this item 2 and item 3. We were asked to invite Jerry to speak about this. There has been some email exchanges, which I did forward, but because of open meeting laws, they weren't discussed. So Jerry's here to talk about it, and I know Kevin has kind of been at the forefront on some of these discussions. So I'm going to ask that Jerry unmute and start talking about item 2.
I guess if you've had a chance to read my comments in the email thread, that pretty much sums up what I know to date and the history that I know to date. If you have additional questions or comments, I'll certainly try and answer them.
Kevin?
Yeah, I'm just looking at that again, Jerry. A lot of that was just obviously history on, the placement of why and where. I guess I still have a little concern, not that it's easy to move, a flashing light that sits across from coaches, and I expressed my concern with, aside from if you're parked in the overflow, I shouldn't say that, if you're parked in the Cross Plains State Bank parking lot, which is their overflow, in the evening, it's pretty much the only reason you would ever come across the street at that location. And there's history there, of course, on why that was placed there. So I have less of a concern, other than the fact that on an ongoing basis, again, I mentioned this before, we don't have a sidewalk. So if we're really looking at pedestrians moving not just to a restaurant, but flow of children and things like that coming from the south side of the village to Park School, say, that's the only flashing light. Otherwise, they have to go down to the, to KP to catch a light. So I was particularly talking about Center Street, which freaks me out on a daily basis when I see people sprinting across, or a car buzzing someone's kneecaps. And because I live on the corner here, we see it every day. And it's faintly, the crosswalk is faintly there on Center Street. And again, this is going from one sidewalk to the next. So Main Street has a sidewalk on both sides, of course, and Center Street has one on the west side, nearest the State Bank. kids do cross there when school's in session. That's a natural spot since kids can then stay on a sidewalk the entire time. There's not only now a fainted crosswalk, there's not even a sign alerting vehicles that it is a crosswalk. So again, there's no signage, no flashers, of course, and it's faint on the highway. So I just have concern about that relative to a very underutilized flasher that's across from Coaches, and then a block away, another crosswalk at the lights, of course, IKP. So that's my public safety concern, and I hope it never happens, but if it does, I definitely needed to at least address this as formally as I could here. So Jerry, is anything else that I know you made a couple comments related to that? Any other thoughts on Center Street crossing?
I don't know what you're looking for other than what I put in my email. I told you the history of why it's at Water Street. I offered what had been discussed numerous years or several times over the years about safe route to schools with the installation of sidewalk on Water Street. I guess I don't know what else you're looking for from me.
Sure. And maybe it's more than just discussion from the Public Safety Committee standpoint on whether we feel and recommend that any additional signage is needed along Main Street at what we think are other key crossing points.
Yeah, my only comment to that is we do have some limitations on what we can just arbitrarily put up without getting permitted from the state. So your committee would have to pursue that authorization, and then you'd also have to provide funding.
So I think the question was if we could, I believe this was the question at our last meeting was, are we able to move the flashing beacon lights at Coaches down further to where the kids are crossing to make it safer for the kids?
If you can get the Department of Transportation to approve it and provide the funding to do it, yeah, anything's possible.
What are our thoughts on that?
Well, it would seem if we have existing equipment and we have the ability to move it and make it's safer for the kids and just better for everybody, I guess we should move ahead with finding out if we can get that permitted and what the cost is, so we can make a recommendation.
What do you think, Chief?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the legwork is done, I'm not sure exactly who that would fall under. I don't think this committee would have that authority to contact DOT. I think that this committee's authority is to look at a item that's up for discussion and possible action, and then forward a recommendation to the village board, who then the village board would discuss it and then direct their staff to take care of what they want to be taken care of. And so that, I think that's above what this committee is put together to resolve. So our job is simply to address a public safety concern that's been brought to our attention. We then discuss it and all we are is a recommending body, or you guys are a recommending body to the village board. I would then prepare the recommendation, and the village board would then take that up at a village board meeting if they so choose. And then if they decide that, yeah, this is something that they want to look into, then they would direct the proper staff to do the checking into, not us. And funding would come from the village board because they're the ones with the purse strings. So that to me is the process.
I do think Kevin has made a point a couple times that I think the priority would be to have the flashers on that additional, I mean, to me, I don't think it would make sense to take the flashers away and move them. I think you would add another set. And I think we have probably an area which maybe is a 1, and then we maybe have a couple nice to have, so if that's the 1, that's what we should move forward. If the most urgent, if the pressing one is, I don't know the name of the street, I'm sorry.
Is it
I don't know who's talking, but I can't hear a word of it.
Doug was talking, he just simply asked what street we're talking about,
The biggest priority,
the biggest priority, which I think Kevlin has identified as Center.
center, yes.
Yeah, I propose center, and part of it is, you know, when these decisions were made on 14, granted the, you know, highway and that Xander apartments were being built at the same time or constructed at the same time, but the decisions on Highway 14 was in advance, obviously, of any residents being there, and with that, you know, fully functioning as an apartment complex, and the amount of pedestrians that come in and out of there with their dogs and walk across the highway, I at least my observation is there are a lot more people crossing where the apartment is to the bank and toward the school to the north than there is folks crossing where the flasher is today. So whether it's the flasher being moved, at the very least, my recommendation is that we put signage for vehicles that's a crosswalk at Center Street.
Yeah,
So I would say that should be done. I highly recommend that's done at a minimum. And if we want to look at other, you know, what the cost would be and have that evaluated and see how it would be funded by the village board, that could be a recommendation as well.
Kevin, this is Terry. Is your observation that the school kids tend to cross more at Center Street than they do at the next one down, which is by Coaches? 'Cause
Yeah,
both of
so
them get to
Water
the
Street,
school.
Water Street's the one at Coaches. And if they cross from the south side, so if they cross from Coaches toward the school, they can get across there with the flasher.
Right.
And then they're going to walk. Then they're going to be walking on a very narrow street with no sidewalk.
Right.
For the next block to the school.
Okay.
So, and again, no one lives now at Coaches. You know, there's no. You know, there wouldn't be a reason to cross there. If anyone's coming from, you know, from Bourbon or something like that, they're going to cross at the lights at KP
Yeah.
and come around by, you know, obviously come around by PI or, you know, straight to Park Street, or they're going to come all the way down to Center at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't see any kids ever cross at Water Street. You know, as it relates to kids and less kids now, of course, during the pandemic, but
Yeah.
just the number of people in that apartment, and when they want to get to the north side or across the street on 14, they're crossing at Center Street. And then people that live on the north side here of 14 are crossing Center Street. Sorry, they're crossing either Center Street to get to, you know, Main Street and the park, or they're having to go down to one of the other ends. But
so,
a lot of convenience and just sheer population of people in this area, even bank employees who walk at lunch and want to walk the boardwalk, they're crossing right there.
so can we make a motion? And someone make a motion, a recommendation to change or have DOT look into the lights?
Well, the recommendation would be to find out, number one, if we can put it there, you know, what is that gonna take? And number two, what does it cost? And then present it to the board, you know, we're recommending that they look into this. Because we're not really in a position to make a recommendation about it, right?
Yeah, I don't even think you're in the position to do the checking. I don't think you could call DOT and ask as part of a committee. So I think a motion could be that you are motioning that there be beacons added to Main and Center, or this is what I'm hearing from Kevin, beacons added on Main and Center, or at least signage at the crosswalk. That's the recommendation of this committee to the village board. I then prepare a memorandum with that recommendation, and then the village board, they discuss it like we just did, and they're going to ask opinions of those that are involved. If they decide that, and I think Lori can present on this topic, since she's the member of that represents our board, or on the board, represents this committee. And then if the board so chooses to move forward, then they will direct the proper staff that needs to do the checking into DOT and cost and all of that. Does that make sense, Kevin?
That makes sense to me. Yeah, I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, yeah, I'll make it, just to restate it then, I'll make a motion to, at the corner or at the crossing of Center and Main Street, that beacons be either relocated and or installed in addition to signage as a designated crosswalk.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
And, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Did Kevin? Aye. I didn't.
Kevin, did you aye? I didn't-
I'll eye myself.
Okay, all right.
Motion passed. Okay,
Number
number 4.
3.
Discussion and possible action regarding additional locations for no pedestrian crossing signs. Okay.
Sorry, Laura, I couldn't catch all that. Was that in additional locations?
Yep, for no
Yeah.
pedestrian crossing signs. This is the same thing with the email thread that you and
Gotcha.
Jerry exchanged. I did forward that to this committee, so they should have it. I just sent it again for the recollection, but
When
they
did you
should.
send it the first time?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
It's been a while since we discussed it. But the key was that nobody could discuss it because of open record law, so. But you do have it, because I just sent it again.
Okay, thanks.
So just a general question to the group, and it's an informal, probably discussion related to crosswalks, say in a downtown area. Crosswalks meaning they're marked on the highway. Do you guys feel that there should be signage, at least that alerts in advance of a car seeing painted sidewalk or painted road for a crossing? Should there be signage that alerts vehicles prior to that, or at least from a further distance? And in particular, I'm thinking about across from the wine bar. So we have at least 2 crossings on Main Street in our quote downtown area that there's no signage for vehicles, but there are painted sidewalks. Sorry, painted road for a crosswalk.
I think I personally can go either way on the signage over a crosswalk. I mean, I feel like I notice more if there's a person in the road and a crosswalk is there.
Well, the issue with Main Street is it's a US highway, so there is more truck traffic. There is more traffic on that road at times.
Yes.
It can be a very busy road.
Yep.
It's not a normal main street where it's, you know, it's a main highway.
Mm-hmm.
And Chief, as it relates
People pay
to
attention to
the
those
law
things.
from a citation standpoint, can you remind us again what that rule is as it relates to pedestrians in a crosswalk?
So pedestrians have to be clearly in the crosswalk for that law to take place. So if they're standing on the sidewalk, it would not apply. So there's some confusion as to that if somebody is standing on the sidewalk waiting to cross, that cars have to yield to them. They actually have to be off the sidewalk and engaged in the crosswalk for people to have to stop. It's somewhat of a confusion. So sometimes having alerts that say pedestrian, you would think most motorists would know, okay, there's a crossing, so, be more mindful of it, but.
Is there an issue at this area, Kevin?
I don't know about an ongoing issue. I think for me, as I look at when in a normal summer and with some of the revitalization of the downtown, maybe it's a awareness right now and a watch and see. But my thought would be that this would only be a growing issue as we do more infill from a business development and kind of economic growth perspective, trying to draw people to our downtown businesses.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that maybe it's something to watch and, there's calls on it or,
One of the challenges I struggle a little bit with too is Highway 14 is a busy road. We all get that. Most of the time when I see a near miss or I see things that are unsafe, it is a boneheaded driver or a boneheaded pedestrian or a boneheaded person on a bike. And I'm not trying to say we can't, as a public safety committee, take actions to make our community safer. But I just see people not think.
yes.
And typically that's when an accident or something bad happens. I used to work at the creamery and I would have to back semis across on trout days and on Highway 14. It was like the most stressful day of my year down the creamery.
Right.
Because it was wall-to-wall traffic.
Yeah.
And I think we have some nice tools compared to the 90s or the
Yeah.
80s, whenever that was that I did that. There's nice tools to get across and to help, and the traffic lights help as well. I wish our citizens took as much, care about their own safety too. Like adding the flags to a couple of those stop signs. I certainly see them and notice them, but I still see, people just blowing them off or just in a hurry or looking at their phone. And I don't know how a safety committee addresses some of those types of things. Certainly it's been a little challenging the last 6 months because traffic is down significantly with the COVID
Yeah,
stuff.
it's hard to measure.
So,
And people are out. And I think
People
it
are
is, we can address so many issues and some are, people need to also be aware. And, we can put signage up, we can, keep doing it, but I see kids and adults crossing all at different points on that main street. Every day I go down there, it's like they won't walk 5 feet to get to the crosswalk, they'll cross before it. So, people have to also be safe.
and I want to just be mindful of that balance as we.
Yes,
deal with
I
it.
agree. Yeah,
And from a police department perspective, we're not getting complaints whether it's, Main Street or Center or Main Street, we're not getting a lot of complaints with regards to a pedestrian nearly got hit and those kind of things. We haven't, not that I can remember, at least this year, I haven't seen it. However, it is preventive, but I think we have to weigh kind of what Jerry was talking about, weigh cost to, what we can actually do. So I think taking things one at a time and with everybody who's vested their opinion so we can make the best decision
And
possible.
as problems arise, we as a committee can jump in and get going and make decisions.
During the Highway 14 design process, It was suggested that there be RFBs at every crosswalk. In lieu of that, every crosswalk should have individual signage. DOT nixed that. Their reply and pat answer at that time anyway was, if you have too many, people ignore them because they're just too close together. The motoring traffic or the motoring public will not stop every block. They might stop 2 or 3 times going through Cross Plains, but they're not going to stop on every block for a flashing yellow light and a pedestrian. They'll just blow through them. So that was the DOT argument back then for not having more than there currently is.
Jerry, as far as signage goes in particular, right?
Signage or RFBs.
Gotcha.
But they also gave some extra things like the different colored concrete and things like that. That was a nice DOT addition to help those stand out. You know, they did.
That is correct.
They did do some things on our end, Jerry. I was still on the board back then. But I think overall it's a much safer pedestrian way to get across than it was before the project. I mean, I think it enhanced it a lot. And that's where it's kind of the balancing act.
Yeah.
At least from my perspective, I don't have any other recommendations or motions as it relates to signage in the downtown area for crosswalks. I brought up maybe where those discussions should take place, but minus any further discussion, I guess my motion would be to not make any other adjustments or recommendations related to signage or crosswalk improvements.
So we'll be taking no action on number 3?
Based on his motion, yes.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Aye. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, we are on to discussion and possible action regarding a bike lane on Main Street. Thoughts on this, I guess?
Yeah, do we have any, again, when I see it, it's more often than not, before the time change here, of course, and weather cooling down, but even this last weekend, it's usually a late evening weekend where I'll see bikes and they're road bikers, just following rules, so to speak, but using Main Street. And I guess I don't have any strong feelings. I read, some of the comments. I think, Jerry, you might have made a couple comments on that and some of the history, again, based on the Highway 14 redo. And I don't know that I have any recommendations because I know it does narrow. The width does change a little bit as we head down Main Street. So unless there's other discussion, at least I don't have anything else. I think I'm the one that brought that up, and I probably at this point don't have a motion as it relates to needing a designated bike lane on Highway 14.
So
Even if you wanted one, there's no place to put one. So it was discussed during the design stage with the limited right-of-way width, the need to accommodate through traffic, the design choices that were arrived at. There's no place to add one if you wanted to.
So I'll make a motion, we take no action at this time on bike lane on Main Street.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Pass. 5, discussion and possible action regarding the TASER program. So I think we touched on this.
yes, so what you'll see in front of you is the agenda memorandum, which kind of explains it with regards to the whys, if you will. As you can see, the fiscal impact of it, less than, or for tasers is about 10,800. I did include the quote from the company that would provide them. I estimated about $4,200 for training equipment. Right now with COVID, it's a little hard to estimate specifically what it would cost me to send an officer to train the trainer type of course. But historically, that's about the cost to train all the officers in the equipment, to buy more training cartridges so they could train, and then hopefully send somebody to a train the trainer so that way they could train us themselves, which would eliminate a cost that we would have by sending staff and incurring overtime and those kind of things. So total cost for that program is around, if you do the math, it's about $15,000. Jay brought up multiple points. So one of them, the reason why it's listed up on top, it's a reasonable way to deal with combative, confrontational assailants, suspects, and detainees. It is something that's quite used across the nation. I also included the disturbance resolution model, which places tasers basically right at the control stage, which is no different than our OC, which is the pepper spray. So those are the force options that we have, up to from presence all the way to deadly force. So I placed that in there so you could review it. As far as what he was talking about, as far as usage, that's what the policy would direct as when we would use this weapon. The policy that I've sent to you not only gives you the reasoning for the policy, but definitions and the procedures and the different things that we would employ. Total cost is there as far as the cost goes. Initial cost about $15,000. Additional costs, I think we could absorb it into our budget as part of training. We have to have training every year up to 24 hours, and we already have a training budget. We would just incorporate, our training to meet those requirements. If I see during the course of the years, if there's additional training that's mandated, we may have to increase that training budget. But at this point, I don't foresee a very large increase on training to cover that. So,
Tony, can I butt in for a minute? Do you need me for anything else on your agenda?
No, thank you, Jerry. Thanks for showing up and helping us out.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
So, as far as the total cost, I don't think it'll be much more than the $15,000. And then as far as priority, I think we've all discussed it, and we've beat that down to be a number one as a top priority, especially in the climate that we're policing now. I don't know how many of you have taken the time to read all of this and read the policy and do your own research, but my recommendation would be that we put this back on the agenda for next month, that you take no action now, take the next few weeks to read the policy, maybe do some research on your own, and then come back to the committee with a recommendation or additions to this policy. There's a lot of policies out there that deal with tasers or what they're called electronic control weapons. You can do your own research, and then we could put together a recommendation to the village board based on some of the changes. Maybe you could, add some changes or take some things away. But ultimately gives you some time to read it, really read it, digest it. I think Jay is asking that we take this slower than faster, and I think it's a good idea. Hence why I thought right from the start that this would be a project that should be something we dealt with in 2021. Unfortunately, we are at a stage where less than lethal is important. It's very, very important.
The world has changed a lot the last
Yes, and in all honesty, our officers have three options to them, or four. They basically have themselves, hands-on, which I mean, hands-on combat with an armed subject or someone under the influence of something puts them at a disadvantage, even with the training that we have. And then added, additional people or whatever else is going on. And most of the time, our officers are by themselves, so there's not a backup, anywhere around. Dane County does patrol in the area and can respond, but it may be several minutes. By that time, it's all done. So the hands-on portion is one. Second to that would be the control weapons, which we carry a OC. So we have OC. OC is okay in certain environments, but if we're in a apartment complex, you really can't spray OC because it's going to get into the vent system and probably, get everybody or at least a few other people. So OC is, although it's a great tool, it's not the best of tools. Then after that, then they have the intermediate weapon, which is the baton. The baton is a strike weapon that causes quite a bit of harm, even if deployed properly. You could easily break someone's knee or leg, and that's where you're normally aiming for. But you could hurt somebody pretty bad. And then besides that, we have our deadly force. So there are other options that exist. Taser is one of them. Less than lethal is another one. They exist. They've been in existence for decades. And so we are, in my opinion, behind the 8 ball on this. And this, in reality, this should be dealt with immediately. We should think it through, but we should deal with it immediately. It is a public safety concern. It's a officer safety concern. And I think it's important. So that's my 2 cents on it. I just figure if you guys would want to take this up and look at it, so it's not just what this policy, I've created this policy, but it's, it could use opinions, and I'm okay with that, and it could use corrections or redirections or things that want to be added, because ultimately, when we present this to the village board, they're going to have questions, just like Jay just had questions. So we have to be able to respond to those questions as to why we're leaving it as is. So
Could I ask 2 super quick questions just for discussion?
yeah.
Would there be any advantage to just looking at them as both less than lethal, the taser and the shotgun together?
They're both considered less than lethal. The only difference, there's a lot of differences, but taser, they require separate policies, so you really can't combine them because taser is much less in the force option continuum that we have, so they would fall under control device. Less than lethal is higher use of force. Less than lethal would be in the area of using a baton because you're shooting a projectile that is coming out of a shotgun, coming at the speed of a shotgun and striking you. So that could cause, and I've seen it cause severe bruising. It could cause injury. So the key is that it is less than lethal force, but it's pretty forceful. And Jay is right there, and the policy addresses that. There has to be some consistency with regards to training and how we deploy that weapon, because if you strike someone in the head with a beanbag round, it is considered deadly force because it's such a blow to the head. No more so than a baton. If you hit someone in the head with the baton. Now, if you're justified to use deadly force anyway, then using that weapon to cause deadly force, you would be justified. But the goal is that if those things are used properly and well trained, that officers will deploy them when they need to deploy them. And sometimes they're not even having that option. They might not be able to deploy them because the situation doesn't warrant it, or the location, or whatever the environment that they're in.
That makes sense. My second question was, I thought I remembered that there's no way to convert your existing shotguns over to less than lethal, right?
There normally is a way. Our shotguns are decades old. So it would be like putting something brand new in a really old type of weapon.
Well, and I was just thinking, because I've been looking for my son for a hunting rifle,
Yeah.
rifles are fairly valuable right now, for sure, so I don't know if there's an opportunity to
Yeah.
sell the existing.
Well, we probably will at some point, you know.
Probably come close to what the new ones are.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just for Jake's budget.
These are pretty dated. There is a way to convert them, but there's a lot of requirements to converting them. But now they make actual shotguns that's what they do. They work with the beanbag rounds, or there's different types of rounds, and we could look at that too. But they're made specifically for them. And if you look at the cost of that, and I know that we're kind of moving on, but if you look at the cost of that, the less than lethal shotguns, 3 of them would be to the tune of $3,100. Training and equipment, and the main thing with training and equipment is, again, certifying an officer to train, which my goal would be to keep our firearms instructor the one who trains us on tasers and less than lethal, since it's firearms related. So just getting him to go through the training, and then the equipment, you know, extra shotgun shells for training and that kind of stuff. It's not very expensive, you know, that way.
Where is training available? Is that through the Madison Police Department? Or?
No, we would host training right here. So our firearms and so the firearms, if we're qualifying, we're going
Where does
at.
the person come from to do the training?
So right now, we would have to find somebody that would come and train us. The goal would be that we would train ourselves.
Yeah.
So an officer in our department would be certified to train in all these areas. So that's called train the trainer. That's what
Okay.
Jay was talking about.
So where do you get that training from?
You have to send an officer to a state recommended training.
And that's
So
where?
it's all over the state. I mean, they have them all over. So usually it's, you know, wherever they're hosting them. You know, that kind of stuff, you'd have to do a little more research. Right now with COVID, there isn't a lot of training going on. So with what I mean by in-person training, but maybe we could, you know, get a certified instructor to train our officer right here at the police department to a much less cost. I don't know what's being done across the state, because it's not like policing and training has ended.
Right.
We're just kind of changing the way we're doing things now.
So I have a couple comments. I think I'm sensing very strongly from Jay that he really wants us to analyze this and come up with input. And so I think to keep this moving, we should all read all this, make our notes. When we meet the next time, we just tackle the taser so that we can get a recommendation, so that this can get moving and get started, and the next will be doing the shotguns, because I know, I'm sensing they're just gonna want this us to analyze it, make some heartfelt recommendations so that we can get this, I really wanna get this done. This is I think this is really a 1+.
Yeah, without, you know, moving on so fast to number 6, but, you know, what could be recommended is that we take on both of these topics at our next meeting and not schedule a meeting in December, giving us plenty of time through the holidays to do our thing and when we have time. And then at our January meeting, come back with what you've looked at, maybe phone calls to me with your questions, so we're ready to go. And then in January, we sit down, we, you know, make changes to the policy, adjust the policy, and have it on the agenda for January for approval.
Whatever's best for you to get this done.
I mean, I'm ready now, but I'm ready now to present it as is. I think that you're not going to find a whole lot of differences. You can, like Jay was mentioning, tons of topics. There's just absolutely no way that you can come up with every single situation that's going to, you can't. Yeah, you cannot.
You get paralysis by analysis when you need to take some action.
Yeah.
The other question I have, if it's not an exact number, it doesn't matter, but how many departments in Dane County are utilizing this equipment?
Yeah.
Are you guys an island? Is this something you don't have that everybody else has currently?
I know that it's being studied at the county level to see what departments, but that's a good question to ask. And so I could simply send out to all the chiefs to respond if they have a taser program, to respond if they have a less than lethal program. And so then we could have a better take that way.
I think that would be a
I think
great
that's great,
idea.
I would like
Good
that
idea.
information.
Yeah, I think, too, you know, if we can just do whatever research. I know I spent time looking at, the body cameras quite a bit online, and, I mean, there's a lot of information and stuff that you just wouldn't have thought about. So I think.
Because we'll be tackling that after this.
Yeah, but just to make our focus now on the tasers and the less than lethal, so we have done our research, and any questions we come up with that
Yep.
we see, we can call Tony and say, well,
Yep.
would this be, or, you know, so we have done our research, so.
And I think through these next few weeks, as we, you know, kind of bring this together, you know, we can have those conversations. We just have to make sure that we're not somehow violating any kind of open meeting laws by exchanging information. So if I send you an email about it, just make sure you don't comment as part of the email thread, so that way we don't get into any kind of legality that way. Just give me a call, we'll in-call each other to figure things out, and then come January, we can sit down as a group and, you know, with different ideas. And like I said, the policies were written based on other policies that I've seen and best practice, but there's always room for, you know, additions and corrections, so.
Well, I just want the board comfortable with our recommendations so they move forward. I just don't want this to become meeting after meeting after meeting. I just want to get this done.
Yeah, and I think they do too. I think there is a sense of that, but I think they want us to do our due diligence. Like I said, I'm prepared right now. I think that we have good policies that I've written. I don't believe that they're not well thought out. I spent from the last meeting to now preparing these things and kind of putting these things together. I think we've met all 4 of his recommendations, but I also think that in all fairness of this very serious and potentially controversial program, that we take the time to look at it and give ourselves enough time.
I agree.
Kevin, do you have anything to add?
No, you know, for me, Chief, you know, we're relying on you to put forth, of course, you know, you're closer to this than anyone. I've done my research on it, but it's not at the level nor experience that you have on a daily basis. So for me, when I think about Madison, you know, and I look at the history of that, I think what I read was 2003 is when Madison instituted tasers. They did a revision of it in 05 at least, you know, a couple years afterwards. Dane County Sheriff, I think, implemented 2005. So, I mean, we got to remind ourselves, because I lose track of years, that's 15 to 17 years ago. There's a lot that not only this county has learned that, of course, we can implement day one. It's also directionally telling us departments that have 15 to 17 years now, and whatever policies have been revised over experience in those 15 years is where we're going to start. So I feel a whole lot better taking the starting place that we have right now. Not that we always want to be a lagger, but when it comes to something like this, I'm more confident in the current policies that other departments are using than us starting from a blank sheet of paper. So I'll have, to be honest with you, I'll have very little input and revision, but I absolutely will review that to make sure there's nothing that an outside eye, you know, can comment on or clarify for the board as well.
Okay. Do we need to take motions on these things, or do we want to just take no action on both of them and bring them back to the next meeting?
Yeah, just take no action and have them be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Be a review at the next meeting for a recommendation to the board.
Okay. I'm sorry, I kind of moved to 6 too. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely.
I think, you know, I think somebody said it here, you know, why not combine, I think Doug did.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be easy to combine them, but I think they have their own separate components, and they're not in the same level of use of force. One is higher than the other,
And I think
so.
the board will feel better if it's two different.
Yeah, yeah, and it's two separate programs, so I
That
will.
explanation is helpful.
And does everybody, with regards to emails, is it good for me to send things via email? Okay, so
I actually prefer that.
okay. So that's anything that I have as I'm working through it, I will send it to the committee. I just caution you not to respond to it in the email. You can call me directly, individually, and we can discuss things, but just, we gotta be real careful.
So our concentration will be on tasers. We'll review that in our January meeting, and then our February meeting, we will bring up the less than lethal.
No, we were gonna do both in January.
Oh, we are going to
Yeah,
do
and then
both.
February, I will just specifically do body cams,
Oh, okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
I
So
think
that,
that sounds good.
Yeah.
body cams is a completely different topic, and I think Jay would have liked to see that on this agenda, but it's just too much. It's too much to deal with all at once, so
It's a
I
lot.
left it, after we discussed it, leave it
Yeah.
off the agenda. And I think that we will bring that up. Let's get these less than lethal done, and then body cams could be something else. So in January, I'll start sending you guys stuff with regards to body cams.
Sounds good.
Makes sense.
Okay, so future items then will be the body cams.
And I think we should probably just limit to this unless we get some bombarded with a major public safety issue.
Yeah, I think
Because
so too.
I think this is a lot
Yeah,
to do.
yeah, we'll deal with any issues that come up, but otherwise, our focus will be these items.
Okay,
All right.
so,
Chief, I heard Jay when I kind of asked about timing of this related to budgets, that we should be looking at this cleanly as a non-budget kind of set of glasses that we're analyzing this with, which I totally agree. That said, I think at one point in time we talked about, is there any grants, and not that there's a lot of money nor grants coming to law enforcement
Yep.
necessarily these days, but for maybe smaller communities that are trying to step up to more of the standards
Yeah.
and less than lethal. Anything that
Right.
comes to mind or that you're going to be proposing as part of that budgeted?
nothing has come to mind. I don't know what will happen after we have a change of leadership with regards to the presidency. There could be some openings for grants. Right now, there's nothing readily available. Jay did allude to the CARES Act money. There has been some talk about using CARES Act funds to pay for these two programs specifically. So I've been working with Bill Chang to prepare for that financial impact. We have submitted for some of the funding to prepare for this if it gets passed and moved on. I think that you're talking $20,000. There might be some additional costs that, for maybe in 2022 to continue training, but I think that kind of stuff is going to be minimal compared to the $20,000 that we have for initial cost. So I think that's why I think Jay was loose in saying that we would be able to find that money. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think that's where it
Just wanna make
goes.
sure.
And we'll see what happens with, it seems to me that with regards to grants, it usually comes at the turn of an election, what grants are become available and different initiatives that become available. So I'll be looking for those things, obviously, but we'll see.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you for that.
Schedule our next meeting.
So we have said that the first Tuesday of the month, so in January, that would be January 5th.
Sound good to everybody?
Yes, that should work.
Okay.
At 7 PM. Okay.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
All
I'll
right,
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks, everyone.